Hi, I'm Tom Liam Lynch, and this is an introduction to Bardbots. So you might not be totally sure what Bardbots is. So in the next couple minutes, I just want to give you a quick overview of kind of what the project is, why it is, and what you can expect. So Bardbots is a project that essentially kind of takes two different worlds that you don't always associate with each other, and it brings them together. So in the one world, you have the world of kind of like human languages, right? So in this case, you're going to have excerpts from literary texts like Shakespeare, for example. And then on the other hand, the other language that you bring together is that of computational languages, right? So it's like kind of this pulling together of these two kind of very different kinds of languages, or at least they appear so. But what we'll find actually throughout the course of the project is that these things are actually more related than they appear. So you don't often think of like, English class or literary study and computer science or computational thinking. You don't usually think of these things as going together. But after Bardbots, you probably will start to think about that at least a bit more. So here's what you can expect. First and foremost, you're going to look at an excerpt from a literary text and conduct what's called like a close reading, for lack of a better term. Close reading is the kind of reading that you're probably used to doing with literary texts. That's like you read the passage and you notice like what's the author doing in terms of using literary devices or literary elements. How do those elements develop a particular theme? Let me interpret this text. What do I think it means? Right? So you conduct the close reading first. Okay. Then what you do is you say, well, if it's something like a play, which is often what we'll use for the Bardbots project, then I also want to identify like what's the way the actor might move on the stage if the author doesn't give me too much information about that. You'll see that often with someone like Shakespeare, like the stage directions are actually not very explicit. Okay, so up to that point, you've got close reading and an interpretation, and you've got some stage directions. Great. Next, what you do is you're going to record a performance of that, let's say, monologue or soliloquy. And there's lots of ways that you might do that. But essentially, you're going to go from an interpretation to some stage notes, right, and direction, and then to actually doing an audio recording of a member of your group or team performing that monologue or that section. You have all of this stuff, and now you're like, well, what do I do with it? I don't understand. That's where it gets really interesting. The next part of Bardbots is about taking all of that, and it's about programming a robot to act out the scene. Crazy, right? What you'll find in doing that, though, is that you're going to be traversing these two different worlds. On the one hand, you're going to be like knee deep in the world of literature and of human language, right? Of interpreting text and discussing it with your peers. And then as you start to try to figure out like, well, what does it mean to program a robot to actually be able to act out the scene? You're going to be drifting into the world of computational languages, of the digital, of software. And here's our working assumption in Bardbots, and here's the thing we want to focus on. We think that the relationships between human languages and computational languages, when it comes to teaching and learning especially, we think the relationships between those two different kinds of languages are actually much tighter than they appear. We think that your expertise and your knowledge in particular human languages, we think that actually has a lot to offer in terms of approaching, introductory concepts and things related to computer science. And so what happens if we say like, oh, we use words like syntax, grammar, purpose, audience? What happens if we take some of those terms, parts of speech, and we start applying them to the ways in which we're programming robots to operate? We think that what we'll start to uncover is that when we think in terms of like computer science, of programming and these kinds of things, like it's insufficient to think of them just as like it's a technology or it's an instrument or it's a thing. Instead, these things are actually powered by multiple computer languages or computational languages. And these languages are written by people. Let me say that again. These languages are written by people. So there might be actually a lot to be gained from exploring literary text and using them as a framework for exploring programming. What we also think is it'll help students and teachers find new ways to get into some of these concepts associated with computer science, like within the center of their own disciplinary study and building upon the strengths they already have with human languages. So I hope that was a helpful setup. We're going to have tons of resources online. There'll be other videos and things like this, but welcome to Bardbots, and let's get started.